industry's role in exotic incursions, a case study of the arrival of tomato-potato psyllid. Over to you, Callum.
Brilliant. Thank you, Heidi. You can hear me fine?
We can hear you perfectly clear.
All right, fantastic. Well, look, I really appreciate having the opportunity to talk to you all today. And I guess what I'm going to try and sort of convey here is what happens when a pest comes into the country, what impact that has, and the role that that industry plays in the process of responding to that, along with government. And then look at the insect biology, look at the case study, and then finally look at where we've come to over the past couple of years since it's been here in terms of management and so forth. So anyway, here's a quick overview of the tomato potato psyllid. It's basically it's one of the top 42 high priority plant pests that the Department of Agriculture has identified. It was number 8 on this. So basically, the reason for this is it's a vector or carries a bacteria called CLSO, which is Campylobacter solanacearum, and which causes potatoes to turn brown, and zebra chipping disease. And I'll touch on that coming up soon. But it's also a problem in and of itself, not so much just because of the bacteria that it carries. It feeds and damages through toxin through feeding many host plants, including capsicums, chilies, tomatoes, and sweet potatoes. So it's not just restricted to the Solanaceae family. Very small and very prolific in playing. So here's a great illustration of the size compared to the 5 cm. And this is the adult psyllid. And what's distinctive about them, and you've seen through some of those earlier photos on the introduction screen, is a long, white band across the back of it, which is quite distinct. Now we've got the nymphs as well. Now these tend to be found on the underside of the mid-range of plant leaves of the host crops that it feeds on. There's 5 instars, so the first instar are yellow with bright red eyes, developing further, as you can see on this the central photo there, with enough number of 5th instar or more mature nymphs next to an adult there. And as you can see, there's that they're greenish with a yellowing wing pad. Now, I guess what these are looking for them in crop. Adults tend to have very strong hind legs and basically jump away and fly off, whereas the nymphs are similar to scale in appearance, and they release this sugary substance, as you can see on the photo on the right. Now, they don't tend to move away, so basically that's what we would be looking for if you're wanting to find them in crop. And this is exactly what we've had to do with industry and with state eradication officials working in the process of detecting it. So finally, just a little bit more about the biology. There we've got the eggs, which are quite distinctive, laid on the margin of the leaf, and there's that quite distinctive connective band to the plant. Okay, and I mentioned the hosts. So we've got potatoes, tomatoes, capsicums, eggplants, and sweet potatoes are the main economic hosts. So this is why the government has decided that this was such a risk to industry. I come from New Zealand, and it arrived over there in mid-2005, 2006, and actually had an ongoing and significant impact on a range of crop commodity groups that has basically been ongoing. So, and prior to that, it emerged in the southern states of the USA and impacted their production industries over there as well. So basically, New Zealand didn't know about it until it arrived, but Australia was very much forward-thinking and preparing for this pest. It saw the damage what it did to New Zealand and was on the ball when it arrived. Now, I'll just go to the non-crop host plants here. As you can see, basically nightshades, Jerusalem cherry, field bindleweed, boxthorn, whole range of weed non-crop host plants. So basically, the impact of these is that wherever the psyllid is present, it's able to move from crop to weed host or non-crop host easily, overwinter on them, and then move back into the crop. So basically, it's part of the difficulty in managing it is that large populations can survive, overwinter, and have a reasonably comfortable time. Okay, and then finally, we've got, what does it do?
Excuse me, Callum. Sorry, can I just get you to speak just a little bit more slowly and a bit closer to the microphone? We can hear you, but it's just a little bit quiet.
Sorry about that. I will try and talk as loud as I can.
That sounds a lot better. Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Okay. Look, and the impact, why it is such a major issue is that the adults, nymphs feeding cause distortion of plant, cupping of leaves, yellowing and purpling of leaves, distortion of fruit, and stunting of growth. So it's quite a marked symptoms. And so these pests have been targeted or identified as problematic, and because of the economic harm that they do. This is the other reason why, is because through the bacteria that is carried by the psyllid, feeding moves through the plant and will cause this browning and zebra chipping of chipping potatoes. So this has had a major impact on the potato industry and significant costs. Now, so knowing that this was a problem, it arrived in Australia on early February 2017. Like I mentioned earlier, that the preparedness work had been done. Trapping programs had been in place across the eastern states, fear that it may be blown across the Tasman Sea from New Zealand and establish itself in those areas. We were not expecting it to show up in West Australia, but it did. And so I was dispatched over there by the federal government within a few days to help work with the West Australian DPIRD, the Department of Agriculture over there, in helping with the eradication and containment effort. So here's just an image of showing sort of a timeline. So what I really want to illustrate with this talk is that this psyllid incursion basically follows the classic invasion curve kind of situation. So it arrives, it grows in populations, it spreads, and now we're in sort of the process of managing it. And as you can see, though, that the time frames are quite long. But anyway, I'll get to that. We're still dealing with it as an issue. Okay, so there was this detection phase. So this was a case where there was a reporting from an agronomist, but also a similar detection from a member of the DPIRD staff. So there were multiple reportings from suburban Perth in a few days. But what happened then was that it was found to be present on a broad range of properties and further and further out from the initial infected premises. It was both present in commercial and in residential properties, which made the concept or the problem of eradication so much more difficult. As you can see here, this is the DPIRD staff members, myself, going to properties, going to look at sites and trying to delimit where the bit was present or wasn't present. So that meant that there was a likelihood that it was able to be eradicated given in people's back gardens. Now, the response phase was significant. There was state coordination centres set up, 9 forward command posts, and a large number of DPIRD staff working there. I was one of the industry liaison officers and was based out of that central coordination centre, working closely with DFID staff, meeting every day and overseeing, working with them as they set out traps and try to figure out how far this had spread. So what they did was introduce quarantine zones, as you can see here, and restricted the movement of seedlings and host material. Now, what I really want to draw your attention to here is that there was 87 pest control notices issued. So these were orders to destroy or to stop the movement of crops within farms. So these are subject to compensation under the Emergency Plant Pest Response Need Owner Reimbursement Costs Framework. And so this was had a significant impact on a number of growers across Western Australia. Now, I mentioned the delimiting work, the surveillance work. Well, as you can see here, over the process of the incursion response and the subsequent decision that it was unable to be eradicated, many thousands of psyllids were trapped and captured, and many tests for CLSO, the bacteria that affected, were conducted. So the primary way of collecting or detecting psyllid is through yellow sticky traps, which are quite common and easy to use, difficult to ID and handle, but basically we're very lucky that thousands of traps can be put out across Western Australia to have a clear picture of exactly where the psyllid had spread to. So as you can see, since then, 45,000 psyllids have been captured and only 15,000 bulk tests, PCR tests have been conducted for CLSO. And the great news is that none of those have been tested positive for CLSO. So we're one of the only countries in the world which has the psyllid without the bacteria that it carries. So that has meant that for us in the industry, it has been maybe less of a challenge in dealing with. The feeding damage is still significant, but it can be incorporated into normal crop management systems. All right, another part of what happened was this next phase. Once we were able to, it was deemed unable to be eradicated, investment was made in a transition to management phase, in which that 80% was funded through state and federal money, and 20% was funded through industry money. Now, this was really important because this is the stage where we cannot control the incursion, we cannot just limit it and eradicate it, but we can put industry in a better position to manage it. So basically, the work was conducted, funded, it was a significant investment, focusing on market access issues, industry management plans showing best management practice tailored to various groupings of commodities, cage and lab trials focusing on biological control agents and chemical management, along with post-harvest treatment protocols to allow for continuation of trade. Now, there were some issues arising from all of this. When I talk about trade, interstate and market access issues were a significant problem, and that did deeply impact our growers across West Australia. When I talked about those infected properties that were subject to owner reimbursement costs, well, this was something that was helpful to them if they were able to get them, but it didn't cover a number of other costs that were brought out by this the arrival of this pest, including closure of markets, loss of market access, loss of contracts, and also price dips because of produce being unable to leave state and so being in large numbers in the markets. Similarly, there was issues with diagnostics. The National Diagnostic Protocol was up for review, but it was by the time the incursion occurred, so there was issues with the diagnostics, and that still has to be by Plant Health Committee. And then, of course, finally, there was the mental and physical health costs. There were a lot of distraught farmers and growers. The banks were at the door and at all meetings, and so was the psychiatric help organisations like. I mentioned the industry management plans. These are available on the AUSVEG website. We have a dedicated portal called Tomato Potato Psyllid Portal. These were comprehensive guides, 30 pages each, specialising in the various industries, guiding industry about how to best manage the process. So there has been a lot of legacy from this incursion for continual management. As you can see here, we're talking today, it has spread up to Carnarvon, down to Geraldton and across to Albany, but it hasn't spread to other states. It's not present, it hasn't been found in any other states. It's not present in Canberra or elsewhere. And so it's a problem that is now, I guess, manageable, but still there are restrictions on movement, and there is the concern that it will at some point spread to the eastern states. So this is my last slide. I'm conscious of time, but given that, there was discussion with the Plant Health Committee to formalise a process by which continued movement of produce could occur if a detection of psyllid were made in one of the eastern states. This is because a lot of, say, potato movements require moving interstate processing markets. And so the closure of markets, the closure of states would have done much more damage to the industry than the actual insect. So it has been approved from in this form of this communique for the movement of tubers from fresh market and processing to cross state borders, which is a fantastic preparedness move that has been done by the by partnership between industry and government. And the seed potato arrangement is still in the process of being approved. So there we are. I guess we started off as being a problem, a significant problem that spread, and is now one of these things that at the moment, at least, industry is able to manage it. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to answer some questions later on. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Callum.